So welcome everyone to Sunday service here at Ananda Palo Alto. I am Nayaswami Parvati and this is Nayaswami Pranava, and we reside presently at Ananda Village in California. I'd like to start by reading from Whispers from Eternity. Tune us that we may hear thy voice. Volumes of thy Savior voice resound through the loudspeaker of every loving heart. The voice of thy wisdom roams through the ether of space, seeking everywhere hearts that are tuned to ecstasy. Sadly, thy warning sermons pass unheard by souls deafened with the static of sense pleasures. O divine broadcaster, tune our souls, long distracted by the static of our indifference. Fine-tune us with the delicate touch of soul perception. Grant us the privilege of hearing thy magic melodies in the ecstasy of divine awakening. So it's wonderful to be here with you all, and this reading, actually, the one from the Bible in particular, is quite strong. No pearls before swine and no dogs reading, having scripture and all of that. So Jesus Christ, as all masters, and he was an avatar, was a completely rounded individual when he expressed the truth. Sometimes in the Bible, as this reading is, it needed to be expressed very strongly to wake people up. Other times he was all compassion and really loving and caring for people. But we need to realize that it takes our effort and our spiritual dedication, concentration, all of that to really be able to hear divine truth. I wanted to read, in fact, in the reading today, it said that little phrase, the truth eventually, we recognize it because it resonates with our own being. And that's really, when we come to really coming to a place where we're able to, what? It's loud. Try. Yeah, it keeps moving. But at any rate, that's fine. When we come to the place where we really want truth, then it has to be something that we make our own and that really resonates with us. I wanted to also read this little quote. It's from one of the longer readings on this topic. Higher truths are only withheld temporarily, until our receptivity equals the power, of the revelation they contain. Pranava here. This doesn't mean that we have to become self-realized or really advanced before we can receive truth. But we do have to be very dynamic in wanting that truth. And the other part, in one of the longer readings, the topic for it says, truth is for the thirsty. God's nectar is for the thirsty. And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about that. In this reading, it says, how democratic is truth? But in the beginning of the reading, it says, truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. So there you have it. It's not about being democratic. Is this too loud? It feels very loud to me. Anyway, it's not about being democratic or not. It's about us. We just have to turn that word around and really come back to where are we at with wanting truth? Do we really desire that? Are we thirsty for the truth? And when that begins to happen, then as we hear the truth and hear about it, hear it taught, hear it talked about, it begins to resonate in us in the deepest place possible, in our own souls. And at that point, then things start to pick up and really can move forward with our spiritual life. Until then, they're nice ideas, intellectual thoughts, but it's not ours. And I thought that what I'd like to do, and this whole concept of, not sharing those higher truths with just anybody. I remember Swami Kriyananda said, in the early years, like 1970s and 80s, he traveled quite a lot alone, and he really enjoyed doing that. And he would meet all kinds of people, and he said to us one time, he said, now here he was, a well-known spiritual teacher. He was starting Ananda. I mean, he had a lot going on and was very dynamic. But he said, when I meet people and they ask me what I do, I just say a little bit. I don't say, oh, I'm the founder of Ananda spiritual community that, is based on yoga and meditation. He said, I don't say that. I just give them a little bit. Well, I teach meditation or something like that, he might say. And then he said, I wait to see where that lands with them. In other words, are they just asking out of politeness or curiosity? But I wait to see where they're at with that. And then if they ask me more, then I tell them a little more. But not just overwhelm them. And I've always remembered that because it's such a really important point when we all come on the spiritual path and are very enthusiastic about everything that we're learning and how wonderful it is, not to go out and overwhelm other people with what we feel deeply within, that resonates deeply with us and is deeply meaningful to us, but not to just do that without really feeling the energy of other people. As the reading says, if you overwhelm someone, that could just stop their spiritual interest for a whole lifetime and maybe longer. It's what fundamental Christians tend to do of, proselytizing. They'll just walk right up and, unload a whole lot of stuff on you. But it's very important for us as we gain spiritual truth to really be responsible in how we share that. And it's important to share it. We share it just by simply being who we are without saying a word. There's a presence there when you meditate. There's a presence there when you know that you're full of light and that you are a soul. And so we want to be just respectful and aware of other people's realities. So I was also remembering, and this is kind of a little aside, but it was such a touching experience that happened to me. Pranaba was there as well. But we went to a restaurant in San Francisco a number of years ago. And while we were sitting there, very small little space, and there were two men behind us. And they were talking really loudly and just saying all these things that, the plans that they have to make this movie and do this business, and just very dynamic like that. So dynamic that we could barely hear each other talk. And I'm thinking, I'll be really glad when they're done. I hope they're going to finish and go, and all of that. And I fully expected, I'm just saying this because it's interesting where people are actually at inwardly. And I fully expected to see two very well-dressed men with ties and all of this. When they left, it was very touching, actually, because they had all these plans of what they were doing, and they were inviting each other to be part of those. When they left, I turned around to see who they are, because I couldn't do that before. It was too close. One of them had a badly scarred face and was pretty much blind. He had a cane. And the other one just was heavy-set and looked kind of nondescript. And when they got up, they helped each other out the door, and they helped each other down the street. And it was somehow very touching because the outer physical reality was so different from what I could have imagined them to be. But, and that, I think, just to say that when we're talking to people, just to let our experiences and what we might have to share with them, just feel their energy and where they're at. These two men had no interest spiritually that I could tell, but again, just that juxtaposition of what they looked like and what they themselves thought of themselves and were talking about. The other part that I thought might be interesting and helpful is just to share with you a little bit about what happened to me when I came on this path. And a lot of it happened in this area, in the peninsula, not San Francisco, but right here, Palo Alto and San Jose. I was at San Jose State and about to graduate in 1968. And I all of a sudden realized, I don't know why this thought came to my mind, but I thought, I can't graduate. I don't know who I am. And it was like this shocking thing. I thought, I've got to stop because once I graduate, something else is going to happen, and I don't know what to do with that. And so I stopped. I just stopped the automatic rolling through of graduating from college. And a girlfriend and I took off, and we went to Europe for 3 months, and we traveled. It was the one thing I could think of to do, and she wanted to do it. And so we had a great time. We just went and traveled. Because it was 1968, we made no plans, zero. No reservations, no travel plans. We didn't know anything. And so we arrived in London, and I'm thinking, wow, London. We didn't even know where to go. Anyway, we fumbled our way through, and we somehow got to Paris, and then we somehow got on a train, and we went through Italy, and we went to Greece. What we ended up doing was we did know a few people, so we spent a month in Greece. She had a friend that had stayed with her family and in Palo Alto here, and so we spent time there. Greece had just had a revolution, and so here we were coming from the wild 60s of California into, on May 1st, they had tanks and missiles going through the streets of Athens. And it was like, wow, really? Anyway, it was an adventure. And then we went to Spain. We spent a month there. And then we went to Germany, had relative there. And we went there. And then we went up to Norway, which was absolutely stunningly beautiful. Before they discovered oil, it was a very poor country, and we visited relatives there of hers. And then after that, though, I realized really in about the first 3 weeks, I thought, this isn't it. Mark Twain said, travel is a fool's paradise. I remembered that phrase, and I thought, it's fun, but it isn't it. It isn't why I stopped my education and what I'm looking for. And so I came back, and that summer I learned to meditate. I meditated for a whole month, and then that ended, and then I went back to school, and I graduated. And during that summer, someone showed me the autobiography. And they said, that's a really good spiritual book. If you're interested spiritually, that's a good book. And I looked at it, and I thought, he looks like a woman. And India, it's emotional, and I don't know. I didn't know anything, but that was my take on it. And so I didn't read that book at that time. But I went back, I graduated from college the next year, 1969, and being a practical person, I thought, well, you graduate from college and then you get a job, right? So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I got a job, and after about a year, I thought, it was just a job to pay rent and buy food and just the basics. And I thought, I can't live like this. It just felt so claustrophobic and confining. It wasn't a job I enjoyed and just, something to do. But I thought there's got to be a better way of life. And so at that point, I was with someone and I said, you know what, let's just save all the money we can in the next 6 months because I'm going to quit. For me that was a really novel thought because I was very practical. If you quit your job, how do you live? What do you do? And so, but I did. I quit because there was kind of this building energy of desperation about what will my life be about? How will I live that will be different and meaningful? And I remember thinking, I need to meditate. I didn't know how, and I didn't know how to learn how to meditate at that time. This was about 1970. And so I quit my job and again traveled for about 3 months up and down the coast, from here in Palo Alto, by the way, up and down the coast, clear up to Vancouver, BC, back down again, and came back. And nothing had happened. We were looking for, I don't know, a spiritual community. I thought I need other people to show me how to meditate and help me. And all that time, there probably were hundreds of communities around. Nope, didn't find one of them. And it was as though Divine Mother and Master, meaning Yogananda, were just kind of closing doors during this whole time. It wasn't about travel in Europe. It wasn't about getting a college degree. It wasn't about working. It was like because I thought, why did it take so long? But each thing, a door was being closed, definitely closed. And so when we traveled and then came back to Palo Alto, by the way, somehow there was a flyer that appeared, and I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere in this area, and it said, Yoga Postures and Meditation 6-week class series. And I thought, wow, yoga postures, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you can do yoga postures, but meditation, that sounds really good. And and then things started to move. And it's interesting when they start to move, but it's that part of where you're building up the momentum of really wanting the truth, of really wanting spiritual teachings. And so then, right before we went to the first class, my friend said, let's go to this spiritual bookstore. And I said, I am so sick of going to spiritual bookstores. I want a life. I want a spiritual life, not a bookstore, another book. But we went, and I thought, okay, well, I need a good book. Biographies, they're always good. So I looked in the biographies, and there was Autobiography of a Yogi, a nice big book. It wasn't too expensive, and I thought, I'll get that. So I bought it, not thinking too much about it. And then we went to the first class. And in that first class, the teacher opened up his briefcase, and it was full of autobiographies. And this man who taught the class, Kirsi Balsara, was Indian, and he had just taken over the year before all of Swami Kriyananda's classes in the Bay Area. So he was very actively out teaching and all of that. And then, again, things start to roll. So I read the autobiography straight through. It was fabulous. I thought, wow, this is it. And but then Kirsi was cautious because Ananda was just coming into being, and he didn't want just lots of people showing up. So he said to us, so if you want to go up there, you can, but you should be together. Your energy should be together. You should have money. We had a little money, and you should bring a business. And I thought, well, I'm kind of together. We have a little money, and I don't know anything about business. But it sounded so wonderful. And so we went up after the class was done several times, this summer of 1971, and just visited a couple of weekends. And there was nothing there. There were 3 domes, and then some little tent cabins and stuff, but hardly anything there. But when I went there, I felt it was the vibration of the autobiography of a yogi, the consciousness, how Swami Kriyananda taught, what he said. The people around him were wonderful. They were really living the teachings, and several of them had been doing so for, 3 or 4 years, a long time in my, recollection. And so, but I could feel, I thought, well, if they can do this, I can do it. And so the things that are talked about and I did end up coming there, and then the next year, 1972, I actually moved there. And interestingly enough, in those years, at the meditation retreat, which we call it the meditation retreat, it was just called the Ananda Retreat at that point because there wasn't any other. There was no phone, there was no electricity, there was not a lot of water, not running water in all the places. There were central locations, and so therefore, when we went there, we just showed up. Driving from Los Gatos with a trailer on the back of a car, a Rambler station wagon, just driving up to Nevada City, up to the meditation retreat, and pulling in and parking it and saying, "We're here." And luckily, on the other end was Satya, who many of you may know, who was a real yogi and just great, never flappable, just always centered and very welcoming, because he could see behind, when we're talking about really understanding where people are at, he could see behind all the effort and the real thing of, is it okay, are we here and it's all right? And he said, yes, oh, that's great, just park your trailer over there and, we'll figure it out later. But each of the steps along the way, I was thinking, were really evolving for me the things that needed to happen to be able to receive the truth. And so from the time I visited Ananda till I moved there, just about 9 months or so, I went back and I was working at the post office at that time. It was a summer job. I started work at 6:30 in the morning. And so at that age, I was like 24, 25, I thought, no problem. I'll get up at 3:30, I'll energize, do yoga postures, meditate, and then I'll go to work. That's no problem. And so I was doing that during the summer. And but what I realized, and there was a point in time, we lived in these, I'll say, cottages in Los Gatos out in the country. That's a kind word for them. They were pretty simple, but cottages. On the other side of where I lived, this man, very nice guy, very involved politically. And so one morning, I was getting up to meditate at 3:30, and he was just coming home from some political event. And I thought, wow, here is the real difference in lifestyles. And so, but I just thought, that helped me to develop self-control. I really had to focus, concentration, and it wasn't, again, as Pranaba read in the reading, it wasn't about, I will make this happen by my will. I wanted it. And so it was so fun, getting up at 3:30 and going to work at 6:30, hey, no sweat. If you really want something, you do it. But you also have to focus your energy. So it helped me to develop self-control. The next element, devotion. In other words, don't give these truths to people who don't have self-control, as it says in the Gita, who don't have devotion. I loved it. I loved all the things I was learning and being involved in. It finally gave me a way to live my life that had meaning, deep spiritual meaning. And so there was devotion there. I didn't even know what to call it, but I loved it all. And then the third aspect is the one of service. And service didn't completely come into my consciousness until I moved to Ananda Village. And then it was all about service. Yes, you had to have a job to make a little money, to buy food and pay rent, all of that, but that was no big deal. But immediately, Swami Kriyananda, who was teaching all the time, Sunday services, teas, going out and teaching, he said, if you see something that needs to be done here, do it. yourself, because it was infinite what needed to be done. There was hardly anything there. And so I took that to heart. And again, I'd never been in business or anything like that, but these were all simple things at that time. And so I thought, well, here's a basic thing that I see happening. There's no food. We were 15 miles from Nevada City, very small, kind of depressed town in those years, and not everybody even had a car. And so I thought, well, let me get some food. I'll get some, order some stuff, and I'll set up in the farmhouse a little room, and at least there'll be some fruit and stuff for people to buy. And that was the beginning of Master's Market. Because somebody said, well, what should we call it? I said, well, Master's Market, of course. It's Master. It's all that. And it moved into the other room and then the other room and all of that. But that was service, selfless service. And so, we were learning about these things. Those that wanted to. Jesus said that phrase, for those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Swami said that to everyone there at the time. Not everyone did it, did things, but those who had ears to hear and wanted to, they picked up on it, and they did things. And that's how Ananda has evolved over almost 50 years now, is that by people saying, oh, well, I see some, that needs to be done, I'll do that, I can take that on. Selfless service, you just get moving in that flow. And why do we want to do all these things? Because it's so much fun, and it's so joyful and blissful and really wonderful. And so that happened. And then the other parts, wanting to hear the truth. I really wanted to hear the truth because I hadn't heard the truth, not in a deep spiritual way. There was a lot of confusion around, as there is today, just a lot of different teachings and stuff. And it's not that there's not good things being said, but for me, I needed to find the one that was my way. And a lot of times you'll find and we ask people, how did you find Ananda? How did you come to Ananda? They're great stories like this. But a lot of times people will say, I came and it felt like home. And that feeling like home is because the soul is resonating with the teachings, with the vibration, with the consciousness. And it's yours. It's your way. Truth is one and eternal. And you find it in your deathless self within. And there's a lot of paths that go to that truth. And this is one very good, clear way to do that. But at any rate, so that. And then the last thing that the Gita mentions is that this is for the truth, and learning about the truth is for those who don't speak ill of me. Krishna's saying this, who don't speak ill of me. And it's like, really? But Swami Kriyananda clarifies that in one of the readings where he says, a lot of people have negativity. We all pretty much have a little bit of that at least. And so speaking ill can be just simply saying, well, yes, that looks like a real truth, but what about da-da-da? And the intellect, the rational mind comes in and really tries to block. It's from the ego. I'm just throwing out a lot of terms here. You have lots of teachers here in Palo Alto that can clarify this for you if it's new. But it's the ego that comes in and the intellect that says, well, I don't know, maybe it's too good to be true. Maybe it's really not all it's put up to be and all of that. So that part we also have to resolve as well. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita calls it the carping spirit, the doubter. And we all have some of that in us. It's very natural, unless you don't have an ego. That the ego at a certain point, you get rolling spiritually and it all looks great, and the ego says, I'm about to lose control here, so let me just give this a little stop, a little break. And so your mind can get into that. But as you prove these truths to yourself inwardly, which is self-realization, then there comes more and more the time where no, it's that little carping mind and those little nagging thoughts, they're not real. That's not what's happening, because I have proved to myself what is real. I feel that resonance within deeply, and I know it's true because I'm living it. And so for all of us, that's what the potential is. That's what the path is about. And this particular path of self-realization started by an avatar, Yogananda, 5 gurus altogether, is very powerful, very clear, very easy to follow. I say easy to follow, it's not all that easy. It's clear to follow, but it requires our effort, and we must engage in that. And really, we engage in it until there's nobody left to engage anymore. So it's not something that, oh, well, I'm new and I don't know anything. No, no, no. Everybody has to continue to choose the light, to choose that divine, to choose to live in a higher way, and back that up with meditation, with all right attitude, all the different ways, service that we have of making that a reality in our own lives. And then, as Jesus said, we're not casting pearls before swine, us being maybe swine. No, we're not. And we really know deeply within that the truth is who we are. We're part of that. The soul has come from the divine, and it must merge back into that divine eventually.